Hello there. This is Ian Nethercott with the famous Auto Hub show, and this is not our live show. This is our recorded show, just in case you're confused. I have someone who's an auto industry expert, a media person, jack of all trades, it sounds like, who does a lot of media in auto, with some opinion, shocking in the car business. Or maybe you can talk a little bit about why the car business and sort of what you do now and how you got there.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how I ended up here. I'm originally from Detroit. I was born in Farmington Hills, and my father worked for the big three automakers. So he worked for Ford in engine design back in the 50s. He was actually a charter member of the Thunderbird Club. And then he lost his job, went to General Motors, worked on the engine and suspension program, and bought a Corvette back then. I think it was a 67. And then he lost his job and worked for Bud Ribbon Wheel and a bunch of other auto suppliers. Ended up at Chrysler, and where my mother got a 70 Barracuda, so I'm dating myself, that was 1970. And then he worked for Fermi too, so he was a nuclear and a mechanical engineer, really talented, but abrasive, we shall say. So he didn't keep his jobs very long, but he ended up coming to Buffalo working in military contract. In the middle of this, his Corvette brakes started leaking, and he created a product of a company called Stainless Steel Brakes Corporation. And when I was 10 years old, we had moved here to Buffalo. Don't do the math. I'm old enough for everything. Good smoke and mirrors. So I used to finish my homework when I was in fifth grade and go down in the basement, because they started it in the basement, and break down calipers. And I was never told, like literally with a breaker bar and the whole thing, because all these brake calipers from Corvettes were rusted. The pistons were jammed in. I learned how to use a slide hammer, and I never thought anything of it. But it was a chance to make some extra money. And I had a huge affinity for James Garner and the Rockford Files, and I wanted a Firebird, so I knew I had to make money. So I was making money helping pack things. The company started getting big. My father quit his job. That company got pretty large. When I was in high school, I had my first car, which was a Camaro. I couldn't afford the Firebird. Close enough. 76 Camaro. Couldn't drive it, but I bought it anyhow. Brought it home. Must change oil 10 times and put 10 coats of wax on it before I could drive it legally. But I have some parallels going on here because my whole life is cars. So that business grew, and I said, geez, Dad, why are we only doing Corvettes? We should do other stuff, because I go to these cruise nights and there's like Mustangs and Mopars. And he's like, we'll go figure it out. So I walked up to a guy who had a 66 Shelby, who's still a good friend. And I said, hey, are your brakes leaking? And now I'm some young girl, mind you, I'm like a junior in high school. And he's like, yeah, they are. I said, well, during the winter, we'd love to take the brakes and work on them. So I brought him into my dad, and he's like, this is great. We did a different process because the seal was in the bore wall. I won't get technical. And I started learning a lot about engineering, doing my own blueprints and all that, because my father said, if you're going to do it, then do it. So, and I was never told, my mother didn't like it, but I was never told you can't do this because you're a girl. And I used to help my dad work on cars since I was a kid. I helped bleed brakes, change clutches. I mean, like, I'm the real my cousin Vinny, I guess. If you've seen the movie, that's, everyone says, oh my God, you are, except without the New York accent. I could add that in if you'd like. So it was funny. So that started going, and I went to the Shelby convention. The Shelby convention was in Detroit, and I put all the stuff in the back of my 79 Mustang, because I got rid of that GM car quick, because it was terrible at an autocross course, because I started autocrossing, and the Camaro was a stone. But the 79 Mustang, when the V8 came back with a real car in the Fox body chassis, I was like, we're golden. I started winning some races, drove to the Shelby convention, and people came up to me and said, I like the brakes, but I don't have disc brakes. Not knowing any better, I'm like, what do you mean you don't have disc brakes? So, well, these cars came with drum brakes in the 60s, or disc brakes if you bought a GT or a Shelby. I'm like, They said, you come up with something, I can put these on my car, and I would. So, of course, the wheels start turning. I came home. I'm now a senior in high school. And I said to my dad, hey, I'd like to put disc brakes on these cars. He goes, figure it out. So he taught me to think. Yeah. And that was important. So I literally pulled out the old microfiche, dating myself, and started those old microfiche machines that the parts guys used to have.
Oh yeah.
And I looked up the difference between the two, and I found that the company that had them all were multiple companies. I called all the companies and said, hey, you have any old inventory? And they go, absolutely. I bought everything. My father thought I was nuts. So I developed the first drum to disc brake conversion kit for 65 to 67 Mustangs. And my father said, if you can sell 100 kits, I'll give you $1,000. Now, remember, I'm a senior in high school, and I'm like, damn, $1,000. that pays for wheels and tires for racing, you know? So we sold well more than 100 kits. We sold thousands of kits, and that opened up to me working to figure out later model Mustangs, Mopars, and other cars. And then I developed a rear disc brake kit, and all that started booming. And again, sometimes in life, you think you're gonna this is gonna be my business, and
Yeah.
a fork in the road comes. We've all done that. You've done that. We discussed that before we went live.
Yeah.
Everybody has, and you're like, how did I end up here? Well, how that happened is I continued racing. And I've raced professionally. I raced in the Trans Am series. I now race in the vintage Trans Am series. But at the same time, in a parallel, Motor Week, which is a public television on PBS here in the States,
Yeah.
with John Davis, they called and said, hey, would you like to come on the show and talk about brakes? Very cool, coming from a girl. I said, sure. This is 1986 now. I said, sure. So I went down and I talked about brakes. I said, this is very cool. And one of the producers, good friend of mine, Craig Singhouse, said, hey, you should be doing dealer training. And I'm like, what's that? And at the time, this was a lot of money in 1986. It paid $200 a day. And I'm like, I'm in. And my father goes, go do it. He never stopped me. He always motivated me to do it. So, hey, that's $1,000 a week. And the first car was like the Escort ZX2, I think it was, in Cleveland. And I was chasing pylons in a parking lot. I go, I have an actual degree in marketing, economics, and engineering. It's sort of a minors in the economics. And I'm like, why the hell am I chasing pylons? So I convinced them to let me do a marketing breakout. They loved me. That's a whole nother story that was a lot of fun because they put me in Oklahoma City after the bombing, and there was no one who had a sense of humor. And I was trying to get them to laugh. And I'm really good at that, typical, but that was the biggest challenge ever. And I ended up being a lead facilitator and doing dealer training all around the country. It was fantastic. Best dealers are the hardest dealers. And I love working with the guys in New York, Boston, Philly, DC, and nobody wanted to work with them. I'm like, oh, I'll take those jobs because I got those guys laughing because they'd come in like this. Hey, it's 9 o'clock. I need to beat rush hour traffic, and I got sales going on tonight. And so my job was to give them everything they needed, make them laugh, have fun, and talk that they had a great time and they learned something. And the training companies, they're still out there, many of them, were like, what are you doing to get these guys to really love you? Because they keep asking for you. And I did it all the way to till 9/11. The pay was great. It was 10 cities, 10 days. The pay got better and better and better. The pay was fabulous. The travel sucked after a while. But the dealers are great, and I'm still friends with many of them. And I learned a ton from working on the dealer side because I was given all the dealer principals, the F&I guys, the general managers, the sales managers, and they're like, we got no time. Tell us what we need to know. I got to get back to work. And I understood that. And I was still working for my dad at the same time until 1996. And then my husband and I started a company that makes tubing products called Classic Tube. We make all prevent brake field transmission lines for collector cars and current stuff. And so who knew that all these parallels would happen? At the same time, I taught my husband how to race cars, and he's phenomenal. He's a mechanical engineer, and he raced professionally prototype cars. We've raced all over the world, and he's a better driver, and I can't afford to have three of us racing because my kids race as well. My daughter's name is Shelby. So yeah, we have issues. We also restore cars. So her name is Shelby. Her daughter's name is Senna, and she's ready to deliver number two. By the time this airs, probably number two will be delivered. His name will be Enzo. So we are car people. But I've worked in every aspect of the auto industry, from working with the dealers, training the dealers for JD Power. And now I'm on the journalist side. So in 1992, I got an odd phone call from Oprah. And I really didn't know who she was until I told my sister-in-law, who went nuts. I'm like, who? Some woman, I don't know. She wants me on her show. But I had done CNN, and Fox News hadn't even come up yet. And so I was Oprah's automotive expert from 1992 until the show went off the air. I wasn't on all the time, but anytime there was something car related, she'd call me on. And that sort of opened a whole bunch of doors. And suddenly I came to this conclusion of either you're doing the TV and educating people and breaking down what I love to talk heavy tech, to really breaking it down so they understand, or the fork in the road, continue working for my dad, which became very miserable after 20 years. And I graduated college and all that stuff, and I had kids, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna take this risk. And we've all done this risk. We've all done this at some point, whether it be a job, a marriage, a move, whatever, fill in the blank. We've all done this, and I had no idea that this would turn into what it has. So I've been on the DIY network. We did 4 years on a show called Talk to DIY Automotive. My real last name is Fix, my married name. And my co-host name, his last name is Ford. His name is Steve Ford. He's an ASE Master Tech. We're still friends. He's a really good guy. So some of you may know who he is. But it just opened up all these doors. I'm still racing. We restore cars. My husband's the number one restorer of 65, 66 Shelby Mustangs and Cobras, and he does 356 Porsches as well. So there's all kinds of cars that we do. And so our whole life revolves around automotive, whether it's car shows, cruise nights. I judge at Amelia Island. I'm a judge at Pebble Beach. And all of this is open doors. It had nothing to do, and I've never used it as being a female in this business. I'm past president of North American Car and Truck of the Year, which is the big award that actually brings the dealers money, the manufacturers. Um, and that was interesting because after they told me, we want to get a woman, I said, I'm not running on being a woman. I'm running on having a brain because in reality, I'm an entrepreneur. And after they got me in, they tried to cancel culture me, but they lost because they thought I was going to fold like a lawn chair. But I'm not your typical female who will just go, oh no, I'm going to get upset. I'm like, see, you barked up the wrong tree. That's that my cousin Vinny and me, you know.
Yeah, I did a show, God, 6 years ago, on women in auto. It was the first show I ever did on the topic. And it
Yeah,
was like, oh no, you shouldn't do that. It's a bad idea, and this and that, and a bag of chips. And I thought it was
depends who
really
you get.
funny. I thought it was funny because when I look at auto, and I have a family history in auto. So my grandfather owned dealerships and gas stations.
Oh,
My
cool.
dad worked in the business. My uncle worked in the business. My cousin worked in the business. I worked retail myself. But what was interesting about that, and fast forward 6 years, I've done many shows with not just women on them, but all women in some cases, mix and bag, all those kind of things. What I find, and this is just my 10 cents on the topic, and I think it's a little bit unfortunate that sort of there's this focus on, oh, well, she's a woman in auto, he's a man in auto, whatever. But what I find from a gender point of view is that the women in auto tend to be a lot tougher than the men as a gender because they have to be. So they tend to be more dynamic. But the thing that's interesting, because I do a live show twice a week, is when I first started doing the live show, I used to ask people for questions before the show. So I'd say,
Mm-hmm.
give me some questions, I'll ask you on the show, not a problem. And then I'd never get the questions from men. The women would always be very good at doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
now I don't do that anymore for that reason. I just don't have time to chase them. But what's always very interesting when I do live interviews, which I do at multiple shows, is the there's not as many women in auto, depending on what role, but they tend to
Mm-hmm.
be very, very strong. And I don't think you ever want to underestimate someone who's got into a room that was populated by some what I'd consider tough men and been able to thrive. It was funny because I did a show now a couple weeks ago. I had someone approach me who's he's an actual race car driver. So he wanted
Mm-hmm.
he's in Indy and he's getting it. Oh, no, he was in NASCAR. He's getting to Indy.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually did an interview, which I haven't had a chance to edit yet, for the guy who does events with racing drivers, train people, kind of thing. He's been doing it for years.
Mm-hmm.
But what was interesting was I had a gentleman from Steve Diamond's new shop
Mm-hmm.
on who I've interviewed before, and then I had this race car driver on, and he's a Mexican American. I think he's out of Texas, but he's
Mm-hmm.
self-funded his racing career. And then his dad eventually said, "Listen, dude, like I got no more
Yeah,
money. Like you want to do
exactly.
this, that's good. I'm fine with it, but go
That's
raise
my
some money."
problem as well. Yes,
Go raise some
self-funding.
money. So it
Yeah.
was kind of an interesting show. But when I look at a passion for cars, and more importantly, what we like to do on the show is a passion for retail. What's interesting is when you look at all the different sides of the industry, and I think a lot of people don't realize it's more than just retail cars. It's more than just making cars. It's more than just a love for cars. It
Mm-hmm.
touches so many things in society that people just don't focus on. And to your point with mainstream TV, I guess review shows or interview shows or
Yeah.
whatever, they don't really connect to that enthusiast community because it's a
No.
different community. But there's more people than people realize who have a passion for it. And I don't think it's generational because whether I've interviewed someone who's 20 years old or someone who's 75 for the show, if they're passionate about it, they're passionate about it. There are some people working it who aren't.
Right.
It's a percentage. But
True.
I had a college professor who was my rendering teacher who worked for General Motors way back. And at that point, they didn't let you design the car. They had different departments that did different pieces of the car. Nobody knew what anyone was doing. And he did it for like 4 years. And eventually quit because he's like, I did bumpers for 4 years. Like, that was my job. I designed
Yeah.
bumpers.
There's
I
people
had
that
no
do
idea
cup
what car was
holders
going
too.
on.
Yeah, there's people that
Like,
just do cup holders. It's like,
yeah,
what a
like, yeah,
terrible
no
job.
idea. Like, no,
That's
no
why I
clue.
didn't go into engineering. My father said, you're going to be stuck in a cubicle
Yep.
designing cup holders for the rest of your life, and you're going to have a sucky boss who's going to come down and give you a tough time. But I will tell you, what you're talking about men and women in the business.
Yeah,
I'm one of the car guys, and I'm an auto journalist as well. So when
yeah,
I go and review cars, the guys will tell dirty jokes and whatever around me. No
yeah.
big deal. When the women show up, they stop, except for me, because I'm one of the guys. And it's so fun. I don't take that as an offense because I'm married. I'm whatever. But I think the thing is, and I've had to deal with this many, many, many times. I remember going to a racetrack at Nelson Ledges in Ohio, and they said, you have to run with the women. I'm like, how does the car know if I have boobs or not? And it doesn't. So I thought that was just odd that that was so how they thought. And so I fought them and I said, well, here's your choice. This is like 90s, maybe late 80s. I said, here's your choice. You can let me run with the men. I said, or I can get the press involved. This is back in the day. We can
Yeah.
do a whole story about how you won't let women run with men. That was a whole different time.
Yeah.
And they said, fine, run with the guys. And I broke the track record and I was first in class. So I didn't say anything. I didn't have to say anything. It was all said by, actions speak louder than words. But I've also was on a board. They were going to do a Mustang museum. I won't say who the person is because I don't know if he's even still alive. But he flipped out in front of me, all guys. I was the only female in the room. Flipped out, yelling, screaming, having a big fit. And I looked at him, and everyone is like big, wide eyed, like, oh, he's really upset. But I didn't. I just looked at him. I go, are you done? And he goes, how come you're not upset like everybody else? I said, because you're doing it for reaction. I said, my father yells like this too. I said, you're not affecting me. I said, if you got something to say it. And he goes, I'm not your father. I go, you are not. And that was it. And after that, we became friends. And
Yeah, I
everyone
mean,
in the room was like they all suddenly treated me differently. It was funny.
the one question we didn't ask on that episode was about gender and racing, because when you look at car racing as a sport, I know there's been a lot
Mhm.
of hype around men and women's sports and stuff, which I disagree with, whether they're
I
women or
agree.
not.
That is not cool
But
because we fought
in
for
car
years
racing,
to get our own
yeah,
sports.
in car
Yeah.
racing, and probably in some other sports, there's really not an advantage. It's really about skill. Like, you're
Car
driving
racing
a
is
car,
different.
driving the
G
car.
forces are different. When you're talking about like autocross,
Yeah.
sports car racing, Catherine Legg is fantastic. Danica Patrick made it all the way up to NASCAR. But they put her at a disadvantage because you're only as good as your equipment. You could be the best driver, but if I give you crappy equipment, you're not going to be able to do anything. And that also goes along with sponsors. She is a good driver. She wasn't the best in the field, but they did a good job using her more than she had the opportunity to use them. Although in the end, she's doing fine. We've met each other a few times and have worked together, but there's no women in Formula One.
No.
And the closest is Toto. If you follow F1, I'm a huge F1 fan. Toto Wolff, who's in charge of Mercedes Benz, his wife Susie Wolff was fantastic, but she never got up there. So there's no way they were going to let that happen. The problem is the G forces at that level, those high levels, like even IndyCar, which Danica did, and a couple other women have as well. The G forces put you at a disadvantage, and that's where upper body strength is. And I can't change that. I am who I am. I'm built who I am. If I was going to arm wrestle you, you're going to beat me. I know that. So,
Yeah, you can't all be Popeye, right? It just doesn't happen.
right. And there's a point also. Another thing that affects women is having children. So you'll notice Danica doesn't have kids, and a lot of the other women racers don't have children. I was a pretty aggressive racer, and I'd race you right to the corner and see who had the bigger cojones, and I'd usually win. But once I had my first child, it did affect me a little bit. It slowed down my times. And that's why I said my husband's faster. After the second kid, and I only have two, that was it. It seemed like I can still race and be competitive, but I can't go to a pro level anymore. There's something that changes the wiring on who you are as a female. And that's why a lot of women that do race don't have kids.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching, what was it, last weekend? I was watching the YouTube episode on Mr. Honda, and it was kind of
Mm-hmm.
interesting the gentleman's life from his first car racing to
Yeah.
motorcycle racing and other things. But what
Serious
was
stuff. Yeah.
interesting to me about him as an individual
Mm.
was he was willing to continue no matter what happened, and I think that's why he was so successful. And I think that's also true when you look at any profession in automotive. I think
True.
the challenge I've been reading. I'm listening to another book now, but I listened to Good to Great. Now I'm listening to Built to Last, and it
Mhm.
was really interesting because there's this prevailing idea that you have to have the product first and then you build a company. But what was interesting when you look at a lot of these companies that built to last, they actually didn't have the product. They
Right.
built the company first and the product sort of came along as needed, I guess. But it was kind of
Yeah.
interesting that way. And I think that when I fast forward today, I think it's an Amazon backed startup. They're doing a car called the
Slate
Slate.
Auto.
And I was
Yeah.
really interested in that because when
I
I
know a
look
lot
at
about that.
cars
Yeah.
today,
Mhm.
there's just too much crap. I mean, I bought a used SUV that I've since traded for something else. But I remember when I
Mhm.
was buying that, and I'm a car fanatic anyway. But when I was buying that, I looked at a Genesis product.
I love Genesis. I
That
think they
they
do a great job.
that it was a great car, but there was so much complexity that wasn't needed. And I thought it was interesting because when you look at, say, early Porsche products, or to your point, early Mustang products or early Cobra products, I mean, very basic, simple car with
Yeah.
a mission, right?
Yeah,
And
if you're
that's
going
what
to do
I
Mad
liked about.
Max, just find an old Mustang and you'll be totally
Yeah.
fine.
So I
Yeah, but
like
with
the Slate idea.
Porsches early are fine. The newest after 2019, we were just having this conversation last night. After 2019, it seems like everything flipped. And maybe it's even as early as 2013, but after 2019, I have a 2019 Porsche 911.
Yeah.
I won't tell you which one, but
Yeah.
I'm a car junkie, a huge car junkie.
Yeah.
After that time, it seems like everything got too complicated. Now, if you look at a 2019 911, you look at a 2025 911, you got flat screens. And I've had friends that have had issues with BMWs and everything that's like that, and they're all fiber optic. So when you go to the dealer and you go, it's not running, they can't fix it in many cases. They actually, for the local BMW dealer, it was an M3 competition, great car, beautiful car, carbon fiber, the whole 9 yards. But they had a problem with the center screen, and they realized it was fiber optics. They had to have two guys come from Germany and bring the parts with them. That's ridiculous. Now you're talking like such high end that the technology can't be done here, even though it was probably built in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And you start, well, maybe not the M3, but when you start looking at how complicated cars have become, they've become disposable. And the reason for that is they don't want these cars to last 10 years. I'm restoring 65, 66 cars. They don't want you restoring a 25 fill in the blank down the road. Why? Because it's called, we want you to come back to the dealer every 3 years and buy something new because then that technology doesn't work. It's old. It's like buying an old iPhone. Why would you buy an iPhone 10? What would you do with it? A doorstop? Because you can't download the software. It doesn't hold its battery. And that's what happens with all these hybrids and all these EVs and all these newer cars. Many of them are 48-volt architecture, which means they're electrified, which is the nice way of saying there's an electric motor instead of a turbocharger. In some cases, there's both. But when you start looking at this, they want them to, it's called planned obsolescence. And that's true in a lot of industries. When we were kids, my mother had a dryer that she bought in 1964. And when she passed away in '04, that dryer still worked. Today, you buy a dryer, you get 3 to 5 years and it's dead, like your TV. And then suddenly one day it's like, doesn't work. And
So
that's
what do you
exactly
think
what they
about?
want.
So what do you think about someone? Maybe not an electric car, but one of the things I liked about Slate was the ability to buy a more basic pickup or a more basic car or something where basically it's customizable, but the features
Mhm.
are add-on. So it's like, and the reason I brought up, I guess, a Porsche 912 is a good example. But when you
Mhm.
look at it and you say, okay,
A
well,
912. Okay.
yeah, well, an
911.
example of an entry level Porsche. One example.
Well, you can buy a Boxster, I guess, an older Boxster.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
if the manufacturer was to say, hey, that millennial or Gen Z who wants a performance car but maybe doesn't have 75 grand to pick around,
Mhm. Yeah,
that
there's a lot,
I think
actually, there's
that's a
quite a
market
few of them.
opportunity. That that
Mhm.
that lower cost, more basic car
I
is kind
agree.
of the anti car, and I see
Well,
that. kind of
There's a
where
little bit more than meets the eye on that Slate. First off, they said it priced under $20,000, and that's what I use as my title in my YouTube video. Car Coach
yeah,
Reports is where all my news is. All my car reviews live on Car Smarts if you're interested.
yeah.
So the Slate
Everyone
$20,000
else
price is
knows.
based, yes, is based on the $7,500 tax credit, which, as we're talking today, is about ready to go away because the House passed it as a CRA, Congressional Review Act. That has now gone to the Senate, and on April 30th, it became a rule. So, in other words, the parliamentarian here in the U.S. said that we can't do CRAs. Maybe they passed these 5 important resolutions, but they have to be converted to rules. So they got converted to rules quick, and it was bipartisan, which is really important. So now it'll be on Monday, coming up the following Monday, which will be what, May 5th, I think, at this time. So if you're watching this after May 5th, you'll see it. The Senate's going to vote, and they're going to vote to remove California Air Resources Board and their power, which means they could no longer have a carve out. So the carve out was put together in 1970 and then was given more power from President Obama and then even more power under President Biden. And now one state is making the shot, calling the shots for all 49. And in the US, that's unconstitutional, depending on where you live in the world. And so it would be like California saying you can only drink Diet Coke and have hot dogs. You could not have hamburgers or Pepsi Cola. You'd be like, but that's what I want. You can't have it. You can only have what we want because that's what we're mandating. So obviously this is cars a little different. They don't have the grid to support it. The country doesn't have the grid to support it. The whole grid in the entire country can't support it. And that was proven in Spain, Portugal, and the south of France when they lost power, not because they were hacked, not because of anything, but there was cloud cover and they have no base load. Base load has to come from coal and natural gas. They don't want to hear it. That's why when Newsom's gone, goodbye. Whoever's next, it could be Mel Gibson, it could be Steve Hilton, it could be Kamala Harris, I don't know, but the people do not want to go all electric because not everybody lives in LA and San Francisco. There's a lot in between. And then go all the way out to the desert. They want to make another state and call it New California because they're completely polar opposites when it comes to having the infrastructure for charging and of taxes and everything else. So beyond that's just sort of the surface of California, a lot of issues. But what's interesting to note is that's going to change everything. So for Slate, who said going full circle back, I do get full circle back. Slate is working off that $7,500 tax credit. Take that away, and the starting price is $27,500 or $28,000, and that will get you a stripped down truck. That's a pickup truck. That's a 2-seater, so it's probably have a bench seat. It'll have nothing more than gauges. You would use your phone. You'll have crank windows. I'm totally fine with that, and I guarantee you they will sell those. However, right now we're in essentially concept form. And I know that because I know a bunch of companies that supplied some of the components to build those concept cars. So there's no paint, everything's decals. So you don't have to worry about getting door dinged. You want the car to be chartreuse? It will be. What's the brand of the car? It's Slate. What's the model? You can call it whatever. You can call it the Ian. You can call it the Auto Hub. You can call it the Lauren. You can call it whatever you want, which is smart. So it's allowing you, like Legos, to build what you want. And you can put a cab on the back or a sport back on the back, or you can do whatever you want with it. From that perspective, it's smart. What that does, if nothing more, even if the car never comes to market, it comes down for the next till late 26 when they're supposed to have it out. It makes the manufacturers realize our car prices are too high. We need to start offering more entry-level vehicles so it's more affordable. And personally, I prefer gasoline powered. I understand they did electric because it's cheap and they're very short. I mean, it's like 150 miles of range, so it's not a big battery. But when you're looking at this and you're thinking about, why can't I just go buy a Nissan Sentra or a Kia Niro? Because they made them all electrified. And although the cheapest car in the country is a Nissan or a Mitsubishi, whatever, the fact is it's still too expensive. And the average cost for a gasoline-powered car is $50,000, and the average cost for an electrified car is $66,000. Yes, there are cars less expensive. You can buy a Toyota Prius Prime. You can buy all kinds of other vehicles. I've got 3 hybrids in the drive. I review cars all the time. I have 3 hybrid vehicles in the driveway now. One of them is a Ford Maverick, which I love, but still starting at $28,000. So if you put a Maverick an entry-level Maverick, which would have a gas engine, it would not be a hybrid, it would not be the performance Lobo, just an entry level, up against a Slate at $28,000, people are going to go, I'd rather have the Ford, unless you really don't want to deal with a dealer, because if I get a problem, we go to, there's a million Ford dealers all around the world. Now, if you have a Slate, it's like owning a Tesla. You have to call. We can't fix the software. We'll have to pick it up on a flatbed that's powered by a Ford F-250, diesel, which I find hysterical on the Tesla. And we'll take it to one of our service centers. And I live in Buffalo, New York. So it would have to either go to New York City, which is a good 6.5 hour drive, or potentially Cleveland, which probably wouldn't be till later. And that's a good 4 hour drive. So when you start thinking about that, I don't want my car to be gone that long. Do I get a loaner? No, we'll send you an Uber card. That does not work, especially if you got kids and everything in life. So when you start thinking from that perspective, the Ford dealer would go, oh, I'm really sorry your Maverick's having an issue. Here's the keys to something else.
Yeah.
We'll call you when it's fixed. So that's going to be the big issue for Slate. I like the concept. I think the marketing is a little askew. If they were smart, because I know Bezos is behind a lot of this, but not all of it, they should have called it the Amazon car. Get on Amazon, order what you want. Like, I want it to be orange. I want it to be called this. I want this, this, and this. Hit send, and they'll deliver it to your door like an Amazon package. Here's your vehicle. Here's the keys. Here's your paperwork. And you do it all online, which you can do. A lot of dealers sell all over the country. That would have been a super smart marketing move. Instead, they didn't. But Hyundai is now selling cars through Amazon. So you go test drive it at the dealer. They place your order on Amazon. They'll charge it to your card to get your points or whatever, and then go pick it up at the dealer. Yeah, so I give Hyundai credit for that.
I think I agree with you on the Hyundai. We've had A to Z sync on a number of times. I was actually at their booth this year at NADA in New Orleans. They weren't talking to anyone because they were all paranoid about whatever. But
no, they're great. I actually know Jose Munoz. He's a great guy. Really smart marketer.
They didn't want to do any interviews, so for whatever reason.
But I'll have to go with you next time. I'll get him to interview.
Yeah, I'd love to do an interview. But at the end of the day, what I see as the opportunity for the non-Bezos backed startups or the non-Amazon car, whatever you want to call it, is what it's signaling is there's an opportunity to have a gas powered or hybrid or whatever the engine powertrain is. But I almost thought about it like a Lego. And I was going back to that. That's what I saw as the mastery of it. Like, hey, car start at X, the frame is this, the engine is that, the cap is this, whatever. But I think it's something that manufacturers and dealers have been avoiding for a long time, whereas they just assume, okay, you want one of these 6 configurations or you want one of these 3 configurations. Right. Whereas if you had that, if you simplified the lineup and said, okay, we make trucks starting at this, and you can configure it any way you want. So kind of like what Scion tried years ago, but more of an entry level. Like I'm thinking like hatchbacks back in the day, and simple cars. But more importantly,
there's a reason behind all that, though. Why they don't offer low price entry level vehicles, because again, we're going to tie this all together. You're gonna be surprised. The tariffs have something to do with this as well. We can talk about that. So the mandate came down from the Biden and Obama administrations that you got to go all EV. We knew it was coming. Everybody doesn't like it. I want to have choices. You can't have choices. Everyone has to comply. That's the only way, right?
Yeah.
So car manufacturers are going, we got a problem. We don't make money on any of the electric cars. Even Tesla doesn't make money on them. He sells the carbon credits to the other car companies because he's smart. He gets 7 carbon credits for every car that's sold. The other car manufacturers literally get 4. Yeah. So you don't have enough to offset the EPA, and there's a big fine if you don't comply. So they buy the carbon credits from Tesla. That's how he makes his money. He's not an idiot. He just knows how to work the system. He's very, very smart. Yeah. So this is the interesting part. So if I take a loss on every single car, why are we selling entry-level cars where our profit margin is less? We make money on all the goodies. Oh, the center screen, you got to this and that. They tried to drop AM radio. That's a total bomb. They tried to do subscription services for heated seats. Total marketing blowout disaster. And so instead, what they do is they offer super high trim levels. So we'll offer a calligraphy, an AMG, or whatever. They'll offer all the super high ends. And there's no longer an S model, a basic I just need transportation. I don't need all the extra crap. And they put themselves in a situation where they only make money. They make a lot of money off the accessories and all the higher trim levels and the special paints. I mean, some of these paint jobs, I'm getting window stickers of $6,000. It doesn't cost them that much to change the color. They're doing that because it's a money grab. So the same thing is with, we don't want AM radio. We want you to use our Google-based system because they have to pay Apple and Android in order to put that into the car. So if we can use a Google-based system, Google will pay us. I like this. So now they've done things. I won't say the brand because I'll probably get a hate letter from them. But one of the brands, I own a 2022 of this very cool truck. They sent me a 24. And if you go on my channel, you'll find what I'm talking about. I stand on the tires with my arms crossed and I go, this is my 2022 and this is the 2024. And what's the difference? $20,000. So they jacked up the price, offer some new colors, and there's no change. Not performance, not bigger brakes, not anything cool, nothing. And I asked them, and I got a kind of a nasty text message from one of them, but why are you charging me $20,000 less? I'm keeping my 22. You want me to buy a 24 and everybody else. Why would I do that? And now some of these very cool performance vehicles are being discounted because they got greedy, because they had to offset the loss from the electric vehicles. So in reality, every car manufacturer wants that mandate to go away.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, how am I going to make money? The only way I make money is if I sell cars that you want, that your customers want. Well, how does that work? Get away from electric vehicles. So now when we look at the tariffs, bring that back here, you're going to get all kinds of incentives if you build here. And that's why like Hyundai's putting $31 billion in, BMW is going to move their plant here, Mercedes is going to expand their plant, Honda's going to bring back their vehicles because they won't have to pay the EPA fees. They want to comply with this current administration because it's going to be very, very, very difficult to put this mandate back in place. Because once this CRA or resolution passes, they cannot reinstitute it based on the law. And that will help the car manufacturers actually make some money, which will give the dealers vehicles that consumers want at a more fair price. Because right now, they're ridiculously overpriced, and people are complaining that it's $100,000 for a pickup truck.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see the electric having that much more legs, especially when you look at solid state. And then there's also
well, that's not in production, unfortunately. It's great to have theory, but even Ford is back down on their electric vehicle platform. They thought they were going to come and beat Tesla, and they're like, "Yeah, we're going to shelve that." And that happened yesterday.
What about this combustion hydrogen? What do you think?
I have driven the hydrogen engine through BMW. There's no infrastructure. Where it works best is what Toyota is doing.
Yeah.
Toyota's got the smartest angle on hydrogen. They're using it. They're taking a local methane dump that's near Long Beach, and they're taking the fumes off of that, converting it to hydrogen, and filling trucks for taking items from the port to the warehouse. And then from there, they go on diesel or to rail or wherever they need to go. That's the smartest use of hydrogen for trucks. For consumers, the problem is you go to your local station, I need hydrogen. They're going to go, what are you talking about? We don't even have a charging station here. We have gas and diesel. Now, one of the smartest things that they have in other countries, but we do not have here, and I get access to a lot of executives and a lot of designers and a lot of product planners, and I've had many conversations and trying to get the wheels turning. I'm a huge diesel fan. I have a Porsche Cayenne diesel from 2016. I will not get rid of it. Everybody wants to buy it. I have two of them, actually. Love it because it's diesel. 700 miles on a tank, 38 miles a gallon all day long. I put a pedal commander on it. It does even better now. So I've said diesel. And they go, I go, see, here's the thing. In the 70s, diesel, everyone, oh, it's all smoky. It's terrible for the environment. That was true then. Then they came up with putting urea or AdBlue into it. And that was in 2000. And they were selling them like crazy until some stupid Volkswagen engineers said, hey, I got this great idea. We can build these. Yeah, we can build these without using AdBlue and we'll save money. And of course, they overpromised and underdelivered. And Volkswagen paid the price as well as every brand here in the US. But in Europe, they're still selling diesel. But in some areas of overseas, They have hybrid diesel. So they're
That's
using the
that's the
electrification.
bomb. Oh yeah.
Oh my God, 70 miles to the gallon.
Yep. Oh
You
yeah.
bring a vehicle to North America that does 70 miles to the gallon, no one will ever again, an electric vehicle.
Yep.
70 miles to the gallon? That would be like 800 miles or more on a tank.
Oh yeah. Oh,
But you
I've
wouldn't use it. It's genius. It's genius. And I talked to the guy, I was in Korea last September, and I talked to one of the product planners, and he said, we do sell diesel hybrid, but not in North America. I said, you could bring it here. He goes, do you think people still know about Dieselgate? I go, they don't even know what you're talking about. You could talk to them about unintended acceleration, airbags, clueless, because the mainstream media only covers recalls and accidents. They never cover the actual industry that you and I talk about every day.
Yeah.
And so I said, you bring in diesel hybrid, whoever brings it to market will be the first genius. And if you think Volkswagen had sales, because it was about 60 to 70% of their sales, they're the winner. The first one to get that through is the winner. And I'll tell you, if I could grab the ear of Sean Duffy and Lee Zeldin, and I know them, but I got to sit down with them at some point, have this conversation. If they allow this to come in, forget the electric infrastructure. This wins hands down.
Yeah, I mean, I had the opportunity when I worked for Honda. I always had these questions for the manufacturer, and it was
Yeah.
around hybrids mostly, just because I knew a lot about them. So I had a customer trade in one of these original Insights that did 84 miles
Oh,
per
yeah.
each gallon. And I remember driving this car from Vancouver, where I used to live, to LA, I think, no, San Francisco.
Mhm.
And this car was
That's a good
getting
ride.
rated at
Yeah.
84 with luggage and my wife in the car. Was getting about 54 miles per US gallon real world in this
Wow.
car. And I was like, and it's just a simple gas car. There's nothing crazy about it. But if that would have been a three-cylinder diesel, you would have got well over 100
You
because of
wouldn't
the
have had to stop.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have had to stop other than to go to the
I mean,
bathroom.
I already didn't have to stop even at that. But the thing that was funny about it was when you look at those kind of cars or even that technology, and I actually looked at
Mhm.
buying a Porsche Cayenne diesel a number of years ago now. I tried to buy it, but they want
They're
to sell
hard to find. They're hen's
stupid
teeth.
money.
People that have them, like my son bought the one from me because I wasn't going to sell it, but he needed a car. He was in an accident. And I'm like, all right, I'll sell it. But I bought them both new and I bought them off the lease afterwards. And then, of course, I got the diesel money for it. So I'm golden. I'm totally
Well,
fine.
there was also that, what was it? I think it was a V10 Touareg back in the day.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was
If you can
another
find one,
weird vehicle,
those
but
were
interesting.
awesome.
Yeah,
Those
I
were
think they
awesome.
made them
Now,
for a very limited amount of time.
they sold a V10 in Europe that had 1,000 pound-feet of torque. They could rip a tree out of the ground. I'm like, man, I've been trying to get one, but they're so old now that by the
Yeah,
time they came over here, they'd be
I
just
remember when they sold
abused.
them and nobody knew what it was.
I
It was
know.
like, what is that? It's a V10. And they're like, yeah, it was kind of
Oh,
funny.
I know. Just think about that. That was a great truck. If you can find, I don't even think there's many of those left.
It's like the diesel Land Cruisers from the '80s. If you find one of those,
Oh, yeah.
that's another one
Yeah.
that people really touchy about. Anyway, thanks for taking the time, Tay. I really appreciate it. How
Yeah,
do
no
people
problem.
find out about your show and what you do? And there will be details below. But how is there a website? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. I'm on literally every form of social media from Twitter to Instagram to Truth Social. I'm also on Rumble. All of that is at Lauren Fix, LAURENFIX. Or Car Smarts has all of my car reviews. I had them separate that, all my news, which I put out, both of them 3 times a week. I got a lot of work to do every day, is all the news. So I'm posting on what's going on with this Congressional Review Act. I've talked about the kill switches, which is part of the infrastructure bill. We try to give you information you're not getting anywhere else because not even Automotive News is covering this. So I'll cover things that are really interesting. Like we have Cupra coming to the US. It'll be probably 2030, and that's going to be backed by Penske. That's going to be really interesting, very sexy Spanish car that's got a lot of Porsche in it. Very cool. So if you're looking for a new dealer network, Cupra, Cupra. So we cover all these cool things on our channel. And if you want it all in one location, just go to Car Coach Reports. And I'm Lauren Fix. And sometimes my son covers it too. His name is Paul Fix.
Thanks very much. Have yourself a
Thank
great
you.
weekend.